This is part 4 of my storytelling, fundraising, podcast series. The door slides open and everyone walks out, Rachel and Francois leading the way. They soon meet a group of armed officers. One of the officers comes to Rachel. "You may follow me," he says firmly. "This is new." Rachel looks at him slightly annoyed. "Yes, officer." The labyrinth of hallways the group traversed deposited them into the arena-sized lobby and a maelstrom of protesters the police had forced inside. Rachel immediately feels tiny and minute to the massive hallway. The officers shout to the crowd, "Make way!" The protesters quickly gave way. Rachel notices protesters looking at her. She bubbles up with curiosity. What's going on in their heads? She notices Francois looking suspiciously at a group of young men wearing jackets of dark colors, looking at their group with one of their hands hidden inside of their jackets to then look back at each other and converse. Rachel feels her heart beating fast. They're giving me the creeps. She looks to see Francois looking at her to smile again. Rachel smiles back, butterflies slowly fluttering away. "Oh, Francois, you bring a smile to me every day." They stop in front of a wall of riot police, standing like statues. The group disperses when the wall opens up. Rachel walking with Francois. Many people come to Rachel saying with pleased faces, "Congratulations, Director." One person gives her a present. "Thank you," she says in return, smiling, and then continues to walk. "Would be better if not for those protesters." She sees another woman approaching them. She swiftly comes to Francois, kissing him gently on the lips. Looking into his eyes, "My love," she says in French, "congratulations on your promotion." Francois hugs, laughing, looking down at her. "Merci beaucoup," he says back in French. "Thank you for being by my side." As they pleasantly romance again, some people looking blush and look the other way. One person blushes to their partner. "Why can't we have that?" Rachel feels depressed. "I would like to have that with you, Chris. If only if you're here." "Everyone take your seats," a man says on the stage. "We're about to begin." Francois and the woman quickly kiss and hug. "I will treat you to lunch afterwards." "I want to treat you to lunch, Chris." Rachel shakes her head. She grabs her phone out of her purse. "Why didn't you respond yet?" The woman smiles, her eyes glowing. She walks away from them. They walk to their seats. Rachel eavesdrops on people talking as they walk down the aisle. "They say the road's going to reopen in 5 days, a man says to one of his friends. "And we're going to be back in 3? One of the people replies in disgust. "Pathetic. If we're going to be back that early, they better give us a raise." Rachel looks forward as she touches her hair. "It's not mandatory," she rolls her eyes. "We said that many times." They slowly walk past another group. "I would pay double for those protesters to leave." "Why are they protesting at a time like this?" asks one person. "It's because of the war," another person says. "They've been doing this since the stupid war ended." "Who made the decision for them to come in at a time like this?" asks another person, punching his fist together. "I would definitely kill them because of this stupid decision." Rachel's face turns red as she frowns. "I chose that." Butterflies flutter in her stomach. I made the idiotic decision. Are you okay? Asks Francois in English. She looks at him with a faint smile. I'm fine. Are you nervous? Rachel nods. Yes. Francois nods. I'm guessing Chris isn't going to be here as you said this morning. I know. It's weird, Rachel responds, feeling dread. I text you, Chris. Where are you? Must be because of the traffic. Francois nods again, putting his hand on his chin, looking at her. She nods. I don't know. They walk up the stairs to the stage as they head to their seats, sitting next to each other. Rachel felt simultaneously pinned in from the police line and protesters like cattle bearing down. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Rachel notices Francois's suspicious face staring into the crowd. Do you notice those young men with those jackets? He asks. What young men? Rachel scours the crowd to see the same men they saw earlier move to the front of the police line. Her heart feels heavy. She goes closer to Francois. Do you know those men? Francois nods. Yes, one of them looks like Jules. Your son? Rachel nods in denial. She looks again at Francois. Why would Jules be here? Francois nods. He wouldn't. He calls an officer. Officer, do you see those young men over there? Francois asks, pointing. The officer nods. Yes. They look suspicious. We'll check it out, the officer nods. Thank you. The officer turns away as Rachel nods. What could they be hiding? A gun? She suddenly gasps. A bomb? She nods again with disapproval. As the presenter turns to present her, a young man's scream electrifies the crowd, followed by an explosion. Rachel is thrown from the glass like a rag doll as she looks, seeing the police rushing into action, the masses of people trampling over each other, and some sitting in shock and agony. Jacob looks out of the window of the bus as it approaches the street. Grandpa's house. He signals the driver and the bus stops. The doors of the bus swing open. Thank you, he says to the driver while walking out. He continues to walk down the block until he reaches the house. He goes up the steps and rings the doorbell. He sniffs the air, smelling sweet and delicious barbecue. I'm coming, utters an old man. A minute or two passes until Jacob notices the sound of unlocking at the door, followed by the doorknob moving, and then the door opening to see an old man in casual clothes, smelling like barbecue roasted to perfection. Jacob begins to smile. You smell good, Grandpa. Grandpa smiles back. His brown eyes cheers into his grandson's. He offers a welcoming hug to Jacob. They both hug, chuckling and laughing. Nice to see you again, Grandpa. Grandpa nods. Nice to see you again too, Jake. Looks around to see if there's anyone else. Calmly, there's no one else but me, Grandpa. Grandpa looks at Jacob again. Do Mom and Dad know you're here? I texted them a while ago. Jacob looks at him. He brings out his phone from one of his pockets and shows Grandpa the text. Signed. So far, no response. That's odd. Grandpa touches his gray, turning white hair. They don't act like that. He looks back at Jacob, smiling. Oh well, must be something important. He gestures, welcoming him into the house. I cooked barbecue for all, Grandpa nods, sighing. But not all of you are here. Jacob looks back at him. I'm sure they'll come. He takes off his shoes and places them with his stuff near the door. He smiles. At least I'm here. Grandpa smiles back. They'll miss out on all of the fun. Jacob nods. Yes. They walk to the living room. I will get the barbecue, Grandpa says. Make yourself at home. Jacob smiles back as he goes to the restroom to wash. He comes back to the living room and grabs the remote, turning on the TV to a football game that is about to start. He sits down on the couch, looking at the TV. He brings his hand to his mouth. Grandpa comes back with a bus cart, and on the cart, barbecue. Well done pork ribs cooked to perfection, and many different sides, all on different plates. The tantalizing aroma drags Jacob away from watching the game to helping Grandpa with the food, placing it all on the wide table in the middle of the room, along with a jug of water, plates, cups, napkins, and serving and eating utensils. Grandpa looks at Jacob smiling. Smoothly, you're already a young man. Jacob looks back at him smiling as he places the last items on the table. Done. Jacob sits back on the couch. Thank you, Jacob. Jacob smiles again and looks at the food. If they come later, I won't have to worry about setting up everything for them, Grandpa says, laying back with his hands on his head on the comfy couch. Jacob nods, grabs the plate and utensils, the food, a cup of water, and begins to chow down on the food, watching the game. He was halfway through his pork rib when a man's voice coming from the TV says, I don't know how to thank all of those brave men and women who fought in the war 65 years ago that ended exactly tomorrow in 2070. They all sacrificed everything for us to live and enjoy life like this marvelous game. Applause rips through the TV. Jacob suddenly stops eating. Oh, he feels his heart beginning to beat fast. Grandpa lived through the war. He looks at Grandpa, seeing a small tear come from one of his eyes, to then wipe it off, sigh, and come back to his usual smile. Jacob conflicts. Should I ask him? Not? He sips water from his cup. Feels like he doesn't want to eat anymore. He sighs. Okay, I'll ask. He looks at Grandpa. Grandpa, do you remember the war? Grandpa looks at Jacob, nods slowly, sips water from his cup, and sighs. I was 10 in 2050 when both my mom and dad were taking me to school. All of a sudden, flashes of light filled the sky, followed by dust, ash, and smoke that blocked the sun. The next thing I knew, Dad, a policeman, grabbed his gun and jolted out of the car. I remember Dad calling Mom and I out of the car as soldiers come to us yelling, "We need to leave now!" Instantaneously, like a lightning bolt, I was stampeding over dead bodies lying all over the place, hand in hand with Mom and Dad in the ear-breaking weapon crossfire, until a forceful explosion knocked me out. Jacob feels his heart shook to the core and trembles. He notices Grandpa, his face pale and tears dripping out of his eyes. Jacob places his hand on Grandpa's and peers into his eyes. I feel sorry for what you experienced. Grandpa sighs slowly and nods. It's hard for me to share this. Why? Jacob asks. I've been through a lot in my first 20 years of life, Grandpa responds. Everything I said is simply one small part of the bigger picture. Grandpa touches his heart. Whenever I would like to share this, my heart would pound hard and my face would feel like a burning cinder because I am afraid people won't listen to me. I listened, Jacob nods, taking a sip of water. A relieving smile goes across Grandpa's face. Thank you. A sudden knock brings Grandpa up. The two curiously look at the door. Grandpa wanders over to the door, unlocks and pulls it wide open to reveal a police officer. After conversing, the officer salutes to Grandpa and leaves. He closes the door and comes to Jacob with a stern face. Your mother is in the hospital, Grandpa says, going to the kitchen. Jacob, noticing the sense of urgency, quickly stands to his feet. What happened? Grandpa paces out of the kitchen to the door with his keys. A bomb went off and she was in it, he says, opening the door. Without a word, Jacob puts on his shoes and rushes out of the door with Grandpa. The two enter the hospital's hectic emergency center's entrance. Jacob notices the tension swelling up in Grandpa. He looks to him. What's wrong, Grandpa? I don't like hospitals. After being knocked out by the explosion, I woke up lying in the hospital emergency ward with a constant ringing in my ears. Dad walked through the door, crestfallen, placing his hand on me, saying, I'm sorry, son. We lost her. Then I realized what happened. We slowly walked into the room where I looked over, seeing my mother, a body bag covering her body, lying in peace. I simultaneously felt cold from head to toe, and my heart began to burst with rage, all because the one who loved me so much got taken away in an instant. While I somber, the ever louder sounds and vibrations of explosions filled my heart with depression and revenge as my father placed his hand on me to tell me the news. Grandpa calls over a nurse. With a firm voice, do you know where my daughter is? The nurse taps her touch-screen device. What's her name? Rachel Wagner. The nurse nods. She's now in emergency care. We don't know how she's doing now. She shows them the way to the waiting room. We will let you know once we know her exact condition. Grandpa nods. Thank you. They walk into the waiting area and sat down. Where's her father? Grandpa asks Jacob. I don't know, Jacob responds, pulling out his phone, texting. Dad, this is the second time I text you. Grandpa and I are at the hospital. Where are you? Chris is working on his assignments when his phone rings and reaches for it. Is this Chris Wagner? A woman's voice speaks through the phone. Hesitated, Chris answered. Yes? Who's this? After introducing herself, Your wife's in the emergency ward and is in critical condition. Chris, shocked by the news. What? The woman, after explaining the situation, says urgently, your son has been attempting to contact you. Hairs rise on the back of Chris's spine. Tell him I'm on the way, he says, ending the call, bolting out of the room. Grandpa and Jacob are waiting for the news as Chris enters the room. Where were you? Grandpa asks bluntly. I was working, Chris replies. Grandpa looks deep into Chris's eyes. Who's more important, money or family? Chris feels his heart shook to the core. I am sorry. I didn't hear the news. Grandpa sighs. Chris brings a chair and wraps his hands across Grandpa's. He bows his head and closes his eyes. Lord, I pray you save Rachel. Lord, I pray to you with all my heart. I don't want her to die. He feels tears dripping from his eyes. I'm willing to give everything I have to you. Just please, please don't let her die. Mr. Wagner, a nurse calls them. Can I speak to you and Mr. Trudeau? Chris wipes the tears, nods, and looks at Jacob. Stay here. Jacob nods. The two stand up, talk to the nurse, while Jacob looks at the news being broadcasted on a TV. Who would conduct an attack like this? Asks a newscaster to his colleague. Extremists who have radical views, responds his colleague. For example, the past century had common terrorist attacks led by radical groups. Why now? The only thing we can do is speculate, since we've never had an attack like this ever since the past century. Thank you. In other news, scientists are scrambling as an anomaly is fast approaching Earth. Jacob? Chris calls him to his feet. We're going to Grandpa's house. How's Mom? Jacob asks. Mom's all right. Chris responds, looking to Grandpa. You two can stay with me over the night. Jacob nods and walks out the room with them. Chris has his hands on his head, and Grandpa, sitting next to the table, staring out the window as morning sunlight greets a new day. Jacob, lying on the couch, opens his eyes, grabs the remote, and turns on the TV. This is an NBC News special report, says the newscaster. Grandpa and Chris, curious, walk out of the kitchen to the living room, facing the TV, flabbergasted.